Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. We're in the company of Christopher Dickey of the Daily Beast. We're also with Mira Kamdar of the International New York Times, Brazilian journalist Andre Neto of daily newspaper O Estado de São Paulo, and Pierre Asqui of the French news website Rue 89. We were talking about South Africa and Brazil's presidents, both facing impeachment proceedings. The impeachment proceedings in Brazil could start as soon as next week. On Thursday, it was the turn of Dilma Rousseff's Workers' Party in Brazil to rally around the president. She has called the current Petrobras corruption probe a witch hunt.
Baseado nisso, significaria.
My impeachment based on these fiscal crimes would mean that all governments before mine should have been impeached. Because all of them, without exception, practiced the same acts as I did, and always with legal backing.
That he who lives in glass houses shouldn't throw stone defense, is it going to fly?
You know, I was listening to Zuma's speech a minute ago and thinking, look, that's pretty much mature regarding the speech of the Brazilian authorities at this moment.
More mature?
Yeah, because former President Lula could say, look, I don't know nothing about it. And President Dilma Rousseff could say, everybody has done the same thing for the last
forever
decades. Yes. Yeah. So, you know, there is a simplification of the speech in Brazil, and that's very worrying, I think. We are in the middle of a process of
Venezuela nation.
That's it.
And, Venezuela. Yeah, I can't say it either.
Yeah, and that's very dangerous. Very dangerous. I have the impression that the Brazilian discussion on politics is more and more simple, and that's.
Could it be another Venezuela, polarized to the maximum with violence?
With violence, that's a good question. I'm not sure about it, and I hope it's not the case. But in terms of speech, that's already the case. We are in the same track, you know, and it doesn't help for solving the crisis. Actually, we should just leave the justice do the work and wait to see what will be the country at the end. But the fact that the country is divided, we have two main forces fighting for the power, and I can say that both forces are involved in this scandal. So, what's the solution for now? The impeachment doesn't solve anything.
Christopher Dickey, is Brazil going to be okay?
Okay, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think over the long run, probably it's got a lot of resources, it's got a lot of talent. We certainly saw it rising very fast not so many years ago. We were talking about Brazil as the next wonder of the world. Now it looks like it's falling apart. So it's a country that will go through ups and downs, but this is clearly a bad situation, a very bad situation. And in fact, in virtually all the BRICS, all the countries that were supposed to be the driving forces of the economy 4 or 5 years ago, they're all in terrible shape. China may not be in terrible shape, but it's not in as good a shape as it used to be. Russia's not in good shape. Brazil's not. South Africa's not. So, you know, there are cycles in history, and the cycle is definitely headed down. And when these countries don't have the kind of money that they were able to spend lavishly just a few years ago, then they start to get a lot of serious social unrest. These problems wouldn't have come up if Brazil's economy hadn't started to go down.
Pierre Asqui?
I think what's interesting in those two countries and elsewhere is the fact that it's the corruption which is at the center of the storm. And corruption has become the unacceptable evil worldwide. You know, in France we had 2 ministers resigning over the past 2 years. One for having a hidden account in Switzerland, and the other one for not declaring his taxes. And there's a demand for you know more and more transparency. Yeah. And that's really the case everywhere, especially with the rise of middle class, and that's the case for South Africa and Brazil, where the use of public money is really at the core of the...
The flip side of this is, if you have a really autocratic government, as you do in Russia, as you do in China, it doesn't budge. We don't see that Putin is going to be impeached anytime soon.
Sure,
We don't see
sure.
that Xi is going to be impeached anytime soon. It's where you have that combination of an aspiring democracy
Yes.
and corruption that you have this particular kind of problem.
Mira Kamdar?
Well, which is precisely the situation that we had in India before the 2014 elections, with massive corruption scandals going all the way up to the prime minister, and the result of that was an election reversal. Now it's not clear how Mr. Modi's government is going to fare better in that line, but certainly he promised, his election promise was to come in and have a clean government. So it's all the BRICS.
All right.
I'm sorry, and I think that's a problem. I think we have been too optimistic and too enthusiastic regarding BRICS for the last 15 to 20 years. And what we are discovering now is the fact that all these countries, besides the fact they are, the economy is growing, there's no clear evolution in terms of political practices. And I think we are in the middle of a changing moment, but we don't know what will be the end of this, and that's worrying.
All right, so rising aspirations, but the institutions not necessarily keeping up. It's not a BRICS gone bad, but as Christopher Dickey was saying, China's got its own issues. While the president is in Washington for a nuclear security summit, back home he's got to contend with what? A slowing economy, a major public health scandal over the sale of expired vaccines, and now a mysterious letter calling on Xi Jinping to step down from inside the Communist Party, saying his anti-corruption campaign's nothing more than a power-grabbing exercise that has slowed reform by paralyzing public servants with fear. Pierre Haski, is Xi Jinping plateaued, or is this just a little hiccup for him?
I think what's interesting in this letter problem is that is the overreaction because could the leader of 1.4 billion people be threatened by a letter signed by loyal Communist Party members? I mean, this is ludicrous, and the reaction has been really very, very tough.
The letter's a little bit threatening. It says, for your safety and that of your family, you should step down.
Yes, but no one in China believes that the people who issued the letter have the means to threaten really the top members of the government. And the reality is that Xi Jinping is the most powerful leader since Deng Xiaoping, most likely. He has aggregated more power than his predecessors. There used to be, since Deng Xiaoping, collegial type of power between the president and the prime minister, at least those two. Now Xi Jinping is, as people say in China, the president of everything. He has monopolized power, and he has developed a kind of a personality cult that was unseen for 3 or 4 decades in China, and that has antagonized a lot of people, and he stepped on a lot of people's shoes. So he is facing growing resistance is not the right word, because I don't think that type of things exist in today's China, but growing unease with his style of government, not so much with the political line that he's defending.
And what's the consequence of that? As you say, it's an overreaction on his part. What's going to be the consequence of him overreacting?
Well, he has to go all the way to win this case. If there are more signs of opposition within the party, he will be facing a more difficult situation. At the moment, I don't think he is in real danger. He's really just showing autocratic tendencies when a lot of people, you remember when he came into office, people thought, okay, he's a new generation, he's going to be more liberal, more open. And exactly the opposite happened. The situation is tougher today in terms of public expression, of capacity to organize for the civil society. It's tougher today than it was under Hu Jintao or even Jiang Zemin before that.
Have we bought into the hype as well in the West? So what we always show him with his glamorous wife, the singer, and when he goes on visits, he does get favorable treatment.
Well, I mean, he is the leader of China. I mean, a major country and economy. But I think it's interesting, Pierre's point about the overreaction. I mean, I think everyone's shocked worldwide about how strong the reaction was to this one letter. And a couple of things. First of all, since he came into office, he's been cracking down on any kind of dissent. There was just the recent thing with the booksellers in Hong Kong, for example. So really just no and zero tolerance. And it seems that that zero tolerance is particularly focused just outside China. Hong Kong is sort of on the edge. But now, you know, these two dissident writers, first of all, that letter was published originally on a U.S.-hosted website by a Chinese dissident writer. And members of his family have been virtually taken hostage in China. Members of the family of another dissident writer in Germany have been virtually taken hostage in China. So this, I think this, at once China is poised to play this greater international role and looking outward, but then what is coming in from outward from Chinese who are in countries where they can express themselves far more freely is not to Xi Jinping's liking.
All right, China's problems are the world's problems these days. The overcapacity at China's steel mills being felt in Port Talbot in Wales. Tata Steel announcing this week that competition and slumping prices have led the Indian conglomerate to throw in the towel and sell all its UK assets. Britain's ruling Conservatives, always the champions of free trade since the days of Margaret Thatcher, now find themselves arguing for trade tariffs.
I don't believe nationalisation is the right answer. What we want to do is secure a long-term future for Port Talbot and for other steelmaking plants in the United Kingdom. We've cut the energy costs of British steel, and also with others in Europe, we've made sure that there's proper penalties for those who dump cheap steel on the market.
Penalties for those who dump cheap steel on the markets. What's this world coming to, Christopher Dickey, when the British Conservatives are calling for import tariffs? A bit like in the U.S., Republicans more and more.
Well, it isn't just that. I mean, it's a complicated debate because, in fact, the critics of the Conservatives, of the Tories, are saying that they have been blocking European efforts to change the tariff system so that they could more effectively bar steel that's being dumped on the European market and in the British market. But the Tories are saying, well, we don't want to do too much of that because then we couldn't get the cheap steel for our car manufacturers. It would play out that way. You can imagine if you're a steel worker in Britain, you listen to this and you think, I don't believe a word they're saying. I think all those steel workers are looking at the dole in the years to come. I don't think that they are looking at a situation where their industry is going to be saved. And I think they see right through the rhetoric of Cameron and the people around him.
And of course, André Neto, they could look here at France, where one of the big steel mills in the eastern Lorraine region, they promised it would stay open in the 2012 presidential election. Of course, that's not the case.
That's my point. What I think it's pretty interesting in this story is that Cameron is, even if he's saying, I will not nationalize this company, the situation is pretty much the same of the steel industry in France, for example. And so it proves that it's at least an European problem. And in a time when we are discussing about Brexit or not. That's interesting, huh?
I was going to say, is this an argument for or against Brexit? After all, the EU doesn't let you put in those import tariffs on your own.
Well, it's more a case of whether politicians have one language or two languages. And Cameron is actually paying the price now of a double language, because he's been trying only a few months ago to be China's best friend. You know, he was trying to attract masses of investment in the UK. He wanted to secure London as the financial center of the world, opening to trade in RMB, the Chinese currency. And what the Chinese wanted is secure exports to Europe. And you know, there's this big issue this year about whether China will get market economy status within Europe. And if that's the case, then forget about putting barriers to China's imports into Europe. So you cannot tell the steel workers we're with you and tell China we're with you. You have to choose. And that's where today Cameron is naked.
I would just add that there's another dimension to this, and that is the cost of the pension program in the Britain's steel industry. It's been called a pension plan with a business attached to it. It's got over £14 billion worth of costs for the pension program. It's over £400 million in debt right now, 130,000 current and past workers depending on that pension program. And just as that was a big issue in the U.S. auto industry and its decline, a while
It's a
back.
similar pattern.
It's a similar kind of issue with, and then so Tata wanting to sell off its UK steel doesn't necessarily mean it's cold on the EU, since it's also announced, or there's the news in the press today, that it is buying a big share in a German steel concern, Tyson. So that's another dimension to this.
All right, can we connect the dots between the Easter Sunday playground suicide bombing in Lahore and the concomitant Islamist protests outside Pakistan's parliament that went on for 4 days this week? No, you might say, the killing of 73 in Lahore has been claimed by an offshoot of the Taliban, who targeted Christians, even though a majority of the victims in that playground were Muslim. And while the Islamists were squarely focusing on the recent execution of Mumtaz Qadri, he's the bodyguard who back in 2011 murdered the governor of Punjab for wanting to relax the country's tough blasphemy laws. That 4-day siege lifted with the protesters claiming they got guarantees, while the government insisting, Mira Kamdar, that nothing was put in writing. Who do you believe?
Well, this is really a big conflict between the sort of conservative Islamist factions in Pakistan, which have been allowed to thrive under successive Pakistani governments and the Pakistani military. This particular splinter group that was responsible or claimed responsibility for the attack in Lahore and has been responsible for other devastating attacks in the last 18 months, Jamaat-e-Ahrar, has been allowed to kind of thrive in an environment where proxy fighters in other Islamist groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba have been nourished by the Pakistani government and the military in order to wage attacks against either India or Afghanistan. So that's one part of what's going on. There's also this kind of power struggle between the Sharif family. Lahore is Nawaz Sharif, the prime minister's hometown. Punjab is their home region. His brother is the governor of Punjab now. He succeeded the one who was assassinated, Taseer, over the blasphemy law change. And he is trying to pursue international investment. He wants to make Pakistan international investment friendly. He therefore wants to relax or reform some of these more extreme laws like the blasphemy law in order to make Pakistan appear to be a more moderate place than it is, and probably sincerely, because I think he wants business investment.
On that point, on the hashtag World This Week, one viewer saying moderates have no say in Pakistan. Is that true, though?
No, it's not true. I don't think it is true. But there's blowback from years of policies that have nourished these Islamist groups in Pakistan and tolerance for this, and also a lack of investment in real services, in real education, in sanitation, in employment, so that a whole faction of Pakistani poor society especially has really had no choice but to send their kids to madrasas to study because there aren't decent public schools, and all of that's coming back to haunt the current government.
Be it in Brussels or in Lahore, Christopher Dickey, your publication has been thinking about how we cover radical Islam.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues that we come up against all the time is this whole question of the language that you use. Are we going to call it radical Islam, or the White House likes to talk about extremism, violent extremism, and are we going to be able to separate
There was the arrest
this?
of a French national in a plot this week, and I believe the Paris prosecutor arrested him for accessory to a criminalo-terrorist organization.
Well, that's true. I mean, look, these guys, the guys who were involved with the Brussels and Paris attacks, most of them don't have great backgrounds as Muslim scholars. In fact, they don't have any background. They have a background as petty criminals and thugs. That's who they are. But the question that we've been dealing with at the Daily Beast is whether you can really separate violent extremism from Islam. Is there a problem with ideas that needs to be addressed? And there is one, and we do need to address it. We can't simply say, this is not Islam. We can say, this is a tiny fraction of Islam, but it exists in a world where you have a large growth of Salafi Islam, Wahhabi, huge influence of Wahhabi Islam, all of which nurtures the kind of radicalism that may be a tiny percentage, but that thrives in that environment. And that's where we need to be clear.
Pierre Haski?
Well, there was another aspect to the Lahore bombing, which comes back every time you have these waves of bombs, is whether we cover with the same emotion or the same compassion Brussels and Lahore, or Paris and Bamako, or Paris and Beirut, as happened in November. And this is also another issue that people were complaining that the Eiffel Tower was put with the colors of the Belgian flag, but not with the Pakistani flag. And that's really, I mean, okay, this is an international channel, but from a domestic point of view, I think it's very hard for people to see with the same view what happens at 1 hour train from Paris in Brussels and what happens at the other side of the world, with the complexity that we were talking about earlier. And that's a very strong challenge for journalists too, to talk about these events with the same level of compassion.
And just to add something on this aspect, what I think it's important is that there is a growing expectation, I'd say, from people all over the world to be treated more equally by the international press. That's good. That's a global phenomenon, and I think it's important for us journalists to think about it and maybe to change some practices.
You're no longer writing for just an audience in Brazil.
Yeah, that's the point. That's amazing. I think we are in the middle of a globalization, new world, globalized new world, and we have to adapt ourselves also.
I want to thank you, Andre Neto. I want to thank Christopher Dickey, Pierre Haski. I also want to thank Mira Kamdar. Stay with us, though. We have one more topic to discuss, and we'll do it in Media Watch. And we say hello to Shona Bhattacharya.
Hi, François.
Shona, it's official. According to a survey of 20 million people done by London Imperial College around the globe, the obese now outnumber the malnourished, and it's going to get worse between now and 2025. The survey published by medical journal The Lancet. The U.S. already home to 1 in 4 severely obese men and almost 1 in 5 severely obese women.
That's right. So The Lancet, a highly respected health journal, published a study that claims that 641 million people around the world are obese. In Australia, that's 1 out of every 4 people, like the similar numbers to the United States. This Australian Huffington Post article argues for more government steps to curb obesity, say by taxing sugars more. The article says government intervention would be a more long-term solution than stomach stapling, which is what The Lancet proposes as the fastest fix solution, not the only one, but maybe in the short term, the fastest fix solution. The article quotes a senior director for the University of Sydney George Institute for Global Health as saying it's government that needs to start taking actions on behalf of people.
Christopher Dickey, we remember the New York City mayor a few years back had a war on soft drinks.
Well, he had a war on supersized soft drinks. He didn't say don't drink soft drinks. He said just don't sell them in quantities like this.
And is that something we should now be looking at in the way that we go to war on cigarettes, for instance?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think the challenge here is to make it possible for people who don't have high incomes to eat well and to encourage them to eat well. There's a lot of that in France, a lot of pushing that. But in America, if you don't have a lot of money, you eat a lot of sugar. That's what you eat. You eat crap all the time. And it is hugely fattening and terrible for you. And that's why we have these huge obesity problems.
And in fact, the study says that 1 out of every 6 people 1 out of every 5 people that is obese in the world, of these 641 million, are in 6 developed countries: the U.S., Canada, Ireland, Britain, New Zealand, and Australia.
It's an Anglo-Saxon curse.
And that's exactly. And so my next article is by a French obesity expert that notes that, in fact, it is an Anglo-Saxon curse, except for Ireland is not cool. Anyway,
they say the Chinese are soon going to have...
The Chinese are number 2, that's right.
And they're going to have more and more.
And so the expert says that one of the reasons for this, the fact that all these countries are Anglo-Saxon, is because that they're more modern, quote unquote, in the way that they eat, and so they don't have, they don't stick to schedules as much as in more traditional countries as for meal times, and also that they eat more highly processed, fatty, salty foods. But in France, those kinds of traditional ways of eating are still very much alive. And also this expert says that maybe it's also because that in French culture, the love of eating for pleasure is still a very much big part of the culture. It sounds counterintuitive a bit, but that's what he says.
Mira Kamdar, I see you looking skeptical, very briefly.
No, I'm not looking skeptical at all. I'm completely okay with all of that. But just another point is that with China, we were talking about the BRICS. Also in India, obesity has become a big problem in the rising middle class. And you know, one of the ways that you look modern when you're a rising middle class person in a fast-growing, developing economy is to consume like you think that people in the West are consuming, and you're bombarded by newly open franchises of all the fast food stores, and so you go out to the shopping mall and you buy these foods and you eat them.
And that has huge consequences for a country like India that has such a huge population. When you have even a small part of people that are diabetic, for example, which is the case in India, it has one of the highest diabetes rates. Those are huge numbers of people. I mean, just absolute figures. It's enormous.
I want to thank our panel. I want to thank you, Shona, for this supersized edition of The World This Week. Stay with us. There's more to come here on France 24.